My name is Mila, and I'm 33 years old. I remember the scent of lavender as I sat on that pristine, overpriced couch, trying to convince myself this was normal, that this was help. That sitting in a rented office with floor-to-ceiling mirrors and Himalayan salt lamps was somehow going to save my marriage. It was my mother-in-law's idea, of course. Everything started with her. She's amazing, she had said over brunch, spearing her avocado toast like she was performing. Surgery helped me rewire my life, realigned my chakras. You two need this. You two, meaning me and Clara, my wife. Clara hadn't pushed back. She never did when her mother suggested something. And I, maybe out of politeness or desperation, agreed. To one session, just one. To prove that I was willing to work on things. That I wasn't the problem. Her name was Ria. Just Ria. No last name. Life Energy Coach was the title on the minimalist glass plaque outside her office. She greeted me barefoot, all bracelets and soft smiles, like some ethereal mix of a therapist, yoga teacher, and cult recruiter. She offered me tea. I didn't drink and said things like, "Tell me where your energy feels blocked." I had no idea what that meant, but I tried. I said things like, "I feel dismissed a lot, and I'm always the one holding everything together." She hummed softly and nodded in a way that made me feel like she already knew the answers. Like she had already decided what role I played in this performance. But the first real crack came 20 minutes in, when I mentioned that Clara had been distant lately, that her behavior had changed, becoming more irritable, less present, less her. Ria tilted her head and said gently, "Do you think Clara is reacting to something you're not seeing in yourself?" It was subtle, but sharp. Wrapped in kindness but laced with accusation. A seed. I left that day unsettled. I couldn't quite explain why. Nothing had been overtly wrong. Ria had smiled. Listened. Validated, but also redirected. Always redirected. Every concern I brought up was somehow my fault, reframed as my own emotional blockage. Still, I went back, week after week. At first with Clara, then alone. Because Ria said we should explore my foundation before rebuilding the relationship structure. Because Clara stopped showing up, saying she was too overwhelmed and that I needed the sessions more than she did, and because I was scared of what was happening between us, of losing her. But with each session, I began to feel smaller. Ria was never outright cruel, but she never let me breathe either. Every moment was a diagnosis. If I cried, I was clinging to victimhood. If I stayed calm, I was emotionally repressed. If I spoke up, I was controlling. If I stayed quiet, I was disconnected. She used phrases like mirror, wounding, soul resistance, and intuitive misalignment that sounded profound until you tried to apply them to real life. She never gave advice, just questions, leading ones, like, if your partner no longer trusts you, could that be your shadow self-creating chaos? Or, what if the betrayal you're feeling is actually a projection of your inner guilt?
And
slowly, my reality began to warp. I started doubting my memories, questioning my instincts. I began apologizing for things I hadn't done. And Clara, she grew colder, more detached. She stopped coming home some nights, stopped texting me back. She kept saying I was controlling her freedom. That Ria helped her see clearly. Now. One evening, Clara stood in the kitchen and calmly told me, "I think you're hiding something from me. I can feel it." I asked her what she meant. She said, "You know what you did?" I didn't, but Ria had told her I had planted that idea so well, so deeply that Clara no longer questioned it. I started having panic attacks, shortness of breath, heart racing for no reason. I began avoiding mirrors, terrified I'd see the person Ria described: cold, insecure, manipulative. But the truth? I wasn't any of those things. I was just confused. And I was being gaslit by the very people who claimed they were healing me. The final straw came during a solo session, when Ria leaned in and said, "Clara is exploring what intimacy really means. Don't make her feel caged." The implication wasn't subtle. And for the first time, something in me snapped awake. I walked out without saying a word. Sat in my car and cried for 45 minutes. But not because I was broken. Because I realized I had been broken. Slowly, skillfully, and I wanted it to stop. I wanted me back. I didn't know it yet. But that moment walking away from Ria's office wasn't just me quitting coaching. It was the beginning of everything unreveal. It was the day. I stopped being the one who played along and started being the one who would uncover it all. I kept replaying her words in my head. You know what you did? Over and over, like an echo bouncing off the walls of a room I couldn't escape. I would stare at Clara across the dinner table, waiting, hoping for her to explain. To laugh? To say it was a misunderstanding? To soften? But she never did. Her eyes had changed. Not angry, not cold. Something worse, detached. Like I was a distant memory she was rehearsing how to forget. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe Ria had filled her head with vague energy readings. And now she just needed space to work through her confusion. That's what I told myself anyway. But the space she demanded became distance, and the distance became silence. And then came the accusations. They never started as full sentences. They came in fragments, like puzzle pieces handed to me face down. Who's Lily? Your text looked suspicious last week. Why were you late on Thursday? Why did you delete that message on your phone? I wasn't hiding anything. I knew that. But I also knew how easy it was to make someone feel guilty when they're already doubting their own reality. She'd look at me like I was a stranger holding a knife behind my back. I'd beg her to show me what she meant, what she'd seen. And every time she'd say, I feel it. You don't have to say anything. I already know. It was Ria. I knew it. I just couldn't prove it. Somewhere along the way, Clara had handed Ria the keys to her emotional GPS. Every thought. Clara had now arrived through Ria's language. Every insecurity magnified under Ria's flashlight. I'd hear the phrases emotional sabotage, sacral distortion, energetic infidelity, and I could trace each one back to a sentence Ria had said in one of my sessions weeks before. Now they were weapons. The accusations escalated, from vague suspicions to full-blown paranoia. I woke up one morning to find Clara standing over me, holding my phone. You were texting at 1 a.m. I blinked. I was texting my brother. He's in a different time zone. She didn't believe me. She showed me my own message history and pointed at emojis like they were coded confessions. This heart, you don't use that with him. It was madness. And yet, I started deleting texts preemptively, avoiding conversations that might be misinterpreted, second-guessing every sentence I spoke. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but the burden of defending my innocence became so exhausting that silence felt safer. And that was exactly what they wanted. One day, I came home to find Clara in our bedroom, packing a small suitcase. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling, just folding her clothes slowly and methodically. I'm going to a retreat, she said. Ria's retreat? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She thinks I need clarity, that I need to reconnect with the version of me that existed before I was tangled with you. Tangling. Another Ria word. I stood there, watching the person I loved become someone I didn't recognize. I asked her gently if she still loved me. She looked up and said, that's not the right question anymore. What was the right question? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. If I didn't figure out what was happening fast, I was going to lose her completely. So while she was at her retreat, I started looking. Not just at Clara, but at Ria. I went back through old emails. I searched for her coaching license online. I found almost nothing. Her name came up only in vague testimonials posted on websites with no contact info, no social profiles, no credentials, just grainy photos of crystals and phrases like heal your ancestral trauma in 5 weeks. I checked our shared calendar. Clara had added private sessions every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. I never thought much of them. Clara was a night owl. But now I wondered, were they even virtual? Were they even real? The final straw came 3 days after Clara returned from her retreat. She told me she'd been doing intimacy work. She didn't explain what that meant. She just said, you don't need to know the details. It's not about you. Then she added, Ria says this is my truth. My throat closed up. Something inside me snapped. Not in rage, but in clarity. This wasn't healing. This was erasure. They weren't guiding Clara back to herself. They were guiding her away from me. That night, I waited for her to fall asleep. I opened her laptop, our shared device. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I was trying to survive. I needed to know. And what I found was the beginning of the end. The folder on Clara's laptop was labeled something that, in any other context, would have sounded harmless. Guides for expansion. I clicked it, expecting PDF handouts on breathing techniques or meditations. Instead, what I found made my stomach sink like an anchor. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each with names I recognized: Ashley_H, Tina_M, Clara_S1 for nearly every woman Clara had ever mentioned from her healing circles. They contained files with notes, recordings, voice memos from Ria, even videos clips that looked like filmed sessions. But they weren't clinical. They were ritualistic. Lit candles and triangles, women blindfolded and repeating mantras. Phrases like, "Release the vessel, reclaim the body, and you must destroy the self that was chosen for you." This wasn't coaching. This was indoctrination. At first, I thought Clara had been pulled into something she didn't understand. But then I opened a folder named Mother_Daughter, and there it was. Dozens of emails between Ria and Clara's mother. I froze. I read them. All of them. Their tone wasn't concerned or maternal, it was calculated. They talked about breaking her from the dependency, meaning me, about cleansing through intimacy reprogramming, about opening Clara to new energetic alignments. And beneath the spiritual language, the message was clear. Get Mila out of the picture. Replace her. Rebuild Clara into someone new. And obedient. The emails showed timelines, target goals, emotional manipulation tactics, even pricing tears packages for rebirth retreats that cost $12,000 and promised total feminine rewilding. The most expensive one, guaranteed detachment from all toxic soul ties, a phrase they had now used to define me. This wasn't about Clara's healing. This was a business. A cult. A pipeline that started with vague therapy and ended with submission, sex, and control. There were contracts, actual contracts disguised as energetic agreements. Some were signed by women I'd met only once at dinner. Others were anonymous. They promised intimate openness, financial transparency, and womb restoration through guided encounter. God, they were sleeping with their clients. Or worse, facilitating others to. I couldn't breathe. I slammed the laptop shut and nearly threw up in the sink. I wasn't just losing Clara, I was watching her be reprogrammed, step by step, by two women she trusted more than anyone. I tried to act normal the next day, pretend I hadn't seen anything. But every word Clara spoke sounded like someone else was behind it. A puppet string pulled by Ria's hand. I needed advice, help, something. I reached out to a friend of mine, Lena, a lawyer who worked with cult survivors. I told her everything. At first, she didn't believe me. Who would? But when I showed her the files, she turned pale. This isn't just unethical, she said. It's criminal. If even half of this is real, there are women being trafficked under the guise of self-help. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But more than anything, I wanted Clara back. The real Clara. The one who used to hum Billie Holiday while she cooked. The one who once held my face in her hands and said I was her peace, that Clara was gone. And now I had to decide, do I confront her? Do I show her what I found? Or do I go deeper, gather more and bring it all down from the inside? I chose the second option, because I realized something that night. You don't dismantle a cult with confrontation. You dismantle it with evidence. It was almost poetic, in the worst possible way. That the person who taught me to journal every morning, the one who used to say, thoughts get heavier when they have nowhere to land, had been pouring her soul into pages that now felt like confessions. Clara's diary was always next to the bed. I never read it. It was sacred, personal, a space I'd promised never to invade. But after what I'd found on her laptop, after the footage, the contracts, the messages with her mother, I needed to know how deep it went. I needed to know if there was still a version of her left inside those pages. One who might still be mine. I waited until she left for another moon circle. Retreat with Ria 48 hours away in some remote cabin in Topanga Canyon. As soon as I heard the car disappear down the street, I sat on the bed and opened it. The handwriting hit me first. I recognized it, but it was different, less fluid, more angular. Like her words were no longer hers. The first few entries were harmless. Reminders about appointments, little affirmations like softness is power. Then came the shift. Ria says intimacy is a mirror. What I see in Mila is what I refuse to confront in myself. Mother says, my loyalty to Mila is trauma bonding masked as devotion. I need to dissolve the roles I've been playing. Wife, partner, protector. They don't serve my expansion. Every line felt like a blade. But I kept reading. She wrote about the work. How Rhea had introduced a practice called raw reclamation, which, from what I gathered, was code for sleeping with other people while being guided spiritually. Claire was resistant at first, but she'd been praised every time she took a step forward. There were names I didn't recognize, descriptions of encounters, language that made my skin crawl, shared breath merging, deep surrender to masculine disruption, shedding the last pieces of my monogamous conditioning. One entry was dated the day before our anniversary. Last night was powerful. Rhea said he was a portal. I didn't close my eyes once. I thought of Mila only once, and I let that version of me die right there on the floor. I don't remember how long I sat there. My hands were shaking, but not from rage, from heartbreak, from understanding. It wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration. Clara had been taken piece by piece, dismantled and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. And she was writing about it like it was growth, but the most chilling part wasn't the sex. It was how she talked about me. Mila is my shadow. She clings to who I was. I need space from her silence. She will try to stop me. I have to leave first. She had a plan. An entire section of the diary was dedicated to her exit. Notes about relocating, about moving funds from our joint accounts, about gradually removing my name from leases and utilities. One page simply read, "Begin invisibility." She wasn't just rewriting her life. She was erasing mine from it. And Rhea was the co-author. There was one more thing I found tucked between the pages. A folded note, written in a different hand blocky. All caps, unmistakably Rhea's. Once the old self is cut, you cannot rescue her. If she interferes, do not explain, do not justify, disappear. I sat on the edge of the bed, diary in my lap, the house silent except for the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the wood. I felt like I was inside a ghost story where I was the ghost. Clara was gone. She'd already started saying goodbye to me long before I noticed, and I realized something else. Something even more disturbing than her words. I wasn't the first. She had written about another woman. Lee. Someone she'd met in a past reclamation cycle. The entry was vague, but it hinted at the same process: trust, intimacy, retreat, detachment. It ended with one line. I won't vanish the way Lee did. I'll stay aligned. What happened to Lee? How many others were there? Suddenly, this wasn't just about saving my marriage. It wasn't even just about revenge. This was about exposure, about stopping something that had hurt more women than just me. So I copied every page, every line, every date. I photographed the diary from cover to cover. I sent it to Lena, my lawyer friend, and asked her one thing: if I bring them down, can you help me do it right? Her reply came in 3 words: let's burn them. There's a moment when heartbreak sharpens into clarity, not rage, not grief, but something surgical. That's where I was. After the diary, after the laptop files, after the confirmation that I'd been erased in phases. I stopped wondering why Clara was doing it. I started watching how. And when you stop reacting and start observing, everything becomes easier to track. She had told me she'd be home late that Thursday. A grounding dinner with her mentor after a group session. Something about closure and sisterhood, which sounded as vague as always. But I noticed she took extra time getting dressed that night. Different perfume. Subtle makeup, but not her usual earthy tones. This was red lipstick. The kind she used to save for our date nights. I didn't say anything. Instead, I waited 10 minutes after she left and followed her. Yes, it felt sick. Yes, it felt desperate. But when you know you're being erased from your own life, when the person who once whispered your home into your skin is planning your absence like a spreadsheet, your dignity becomes a smaller concern then. Survival. I stayed far behind. It was easy. She didn't suspect anything, of course she didn't. I'd spent months playing the confused patient wife, the one who meditated during the chaos and asked, "How was your session?" While she reeked of strangers, she parked in front of a restaurant I didn't recognize. Not fancy. Not a hole in the wall either. Just private tinted windows. One entrance. No valet, a place you don't go to be seen, you go to disappear. I waited across the street, behind a tree, like I was in some awful noir movie. I watched her greet someone outside the door. Not Rhea, not any of the women from her circles. A man. He was older, clean-shaven, sharp gray suit, confident in a way. That wasn't loud, but rehearsed. They embraced, not a hug, not romantic either, but charged. The kind of embrace that says, I know your body already. They sat by the window. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. Her posture said everything, laughing, leaning in. One point, he reached across the table and ran a finger down her wrist. She didn't flinch. She smiled. My stomach turned. Not because she was with another person, I had already read about it in the diary. Not because she lied, that had become normal. It was the comfort, the casual ease. The way she handed over her entire presence like she owed him nothing and everything at once. I stayed until dessert. I needed a face, proof. A moment burned into memory. Then I left, but the real blow came the next morning. While Clara was in the shower, I opened her phone. I'd never done that before. I always thought it was a boundary worth respecting, even when things got tense. But now I was past boundaries. I was inside a war zone where rules didn't apply. There were no saved messages from him. No calls, but in the Notes app, buried among recipes and shopping lists, was a locked note titled RR. I guessed the password in 3 tries. Our anniversary. Inside was a single paragraph. His name is Daniel. He activates my core. He opens me with breath, not words. Rhea says this is the final anchor. One more session, and I can begin the unbonding ceremony. Mila doesn't need to know. She fade. Like others do. That was it. She fade. I stared at the screen for a long time. I think my heart stopped. Because even though I'd seen the files, read the diary, followed her to dinner, this was the first time she had put into words the future she wanted. One without me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I took a screenshot. I sent it to Lena, and then I did something that felt both sickening and necessary. I sent it to Clara's mother. I know. It was a risk. But I needed to know if the woman who raised her, who was part of this mess, would defend it, deny it, or finally admit something was wrong. Her response. One line. You're too attached to a version of her that was never real. That broke me more than anything else, because it meant this wasn't just Clara falling under someone's influence. This was a family operation. They knew. We all knew. I felt like I was trapped in a play I never auditioned for, cast as the villain in a story I used to think was a love story, but I wasn't going to fade, not quietly, and not without taking down every last person who treated me like I was disposable. There's a certain arrogance that grows when someone thinks you're already broken. Clara had stopped hiding things. Maybe she thought I wouldn't look. Maybe she didn't care if I did. Either way, it was her mistake, and it became my turning point. It started with a simple need to feel in control. After she left for another weekend workshop with Rhea, I sat on the couch, stared at her laptop for a full hour before touching it. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Her diary had already destroyed the illusion. The dinner with Daniel had shattered whatever was left, but there was something still gnawing at me. A feeling that I hadn't yet touched the full depth of this mess. That it wasn't just about betrayal or manipulation. That something much bigger was happening, and I was only seeing shadows. The laptop wasn't password protected. She'd once bragged about radical transparency as part of her self-work. Funny how people love openness when they think you won't survive the truth. At first, everything was mundane. Photos of beach trips, outlines for podcast episodes, a few spreadsheets tracking her moon cycle and caffeine intake. But then I found a folder deep in the documents directory called simply root. It was oddly capitalized. Inside were dozens of subfolders, each named with a date, some going back years. I opened the most recent one, first curiosity sharpening into dread with every click. There were video files. Dozens of them. I clicked on one at random. It opened with Rhea's face, smiling softly into the camera, candles flickering behind her. She spoke in that same hypnotic tone I'd heard so many times before. Remember, your body belongs to the future version of you, not the stories you were told to protect. Then the camera zoomed out. There were 5 women, all in white robes, standing in a circle. Clara was one of them. Each woman stepped forward, spoke her name, and described what part of themselves they were ready to sacrifice. One of them broke down sobbing when she said, "My marriage." Another simply whispered, "Safety." Then Daniel walked into frame. He wasn't wearing a robe, What followed was not something I can or want to describe in detail. It was intimate, ritualistic, deeply disturbing. And worse, it was framed as liberation, applause, tears, hugs. Ria guiding every movement. Her voice always present in the background like a priestess, orchestrating salvation through surrender. I watched 3 videos. That was all I could handle. But then I found the folder labeled contracts, PDF files, all signed. Legal-looking documents masked with spiritual language. Women agreeing to things like temporary identity release, trauma disassociation rights, temporary relational erasure. And there were payments, thousands of dollars, some through crypto wallets. Others masked as energy exchange donations. Clara had signed at least 5 of them. And there, in the metadata of the documents, was the name of the organization, the Core Unbinding Collective. Address, APO Box in Sedona. Tax ID, registered under Ria's full name. Founding partners, Ria Kingsley and Judith King. Her mother. My breath stopped. Judith, Ria, mother and daughter. This wasn't just manipulation. This was a business. A network. A cult dressed in affirmations, yoga mats, and sensual spirituality. They'd weaponized self-healing into a pipeline of dependence, isolation, and exploitation. Clara wasn't the first. And I was no longer just a wife being discarded. I was a witness to something criminal. I copied everything. Videos, contracts, photos, notes. I encrypted the files, backed them up in multiple drives, and sent one copy to Lena with the subject line. This is bigger than I thought. She called me in less than 5 minutes. Don't go to the police yet, she said. This is federal. Let me make some calls. I asked her if I was in danger. Her pause was longer than it should have been. Not if you play smart, she finally said. But don't let Clara know you found this. Not yet. For the next 2 days, I slept with the lights on. I checked every lock twice. I jumped at every unfamiliar car parked near the house. And I kept pretending I didn't know. Pretending I hadn't seen. Pretending that I wasn't preparing to burn everything to the ground. And Clara, she came back from the retreat glowing. She kissed me on the cheek like a sister. Told me she'd found a new layer of her voice. Said she wanted to share something with me soon, some new vision for our dynamic. I smiled and I said, I can't wait. The hardest part wasn't gathering the evidence. It was walking around each day like none of it had changed me. I brushed my teeth beside a woman who smiled at her reflection like nothing was wrong, who made turmeric lattes and lit sage before meetings, who slipped off her wedding ring during Zoom calls and said it was energetic detachment. I slept next to that woman. I heard her breathe at night, and every sound from her lips felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone dangerous. By the time Lena got back to me, I was hollow. I'd stopped reacting. It was the only way I could stay in the house without screaming. This is real, Lena said, her voice tight. I've confirmed 2 separate federal investigations, but they've hit dead ends, no witnesses. Everyone's too scared or too brainwashed. Mila, if you move now, this could be the breakthrough they've been waiting for. I asked her what to do. You're not going to a station, she said. You're going to drop everything off at the downtown field office. Unannounced. No trace. We called it the handoff. It made it sound like a spy movie, but it was scarier than that. Because this wasn't some corrupt corporation or online scam. These were people who sat in my living room, who knew my voice, who had made a business out of rewriting reality. I printed 3 copies of every file, labeled them plainly. I made a spreadsheet of every person named, every signature, every location mentioned. I even included annotations from Clara's diary and transcripts from the videos. It was a map of a crime scene stitched across time, and I was the only person who could see the whole picture. I put everything in a plain black folder. No identifying marks. No return address. Then I wrote a single sticky note on the front. You're looking in the right place. Start with the Core Unbinding Collective. This goes deeper than you know. I drove downtown before sunrise. I parked 5 blocks away from the federal building. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself breathe. Every passing car felt like it was watching me. I half expected Clara to appear from a corner, Ria to step out of a coffee shop and say, "You're not ready yet. Go home." But I kept walking. I walked into the building, through security, past the waiting room. I didn't say a word. I found a mail drop box near the administration desk, slipped the folder in, and walked out. That was it. No dramatic confrontation. No applause. Just the cold air of a downtown morning on my face and a silence in my chest. That felt like both victory and grief. For the next few days, nothing happened. Clara went about her life. Her clients kept coming and going. Ria texted her affirmations and photos of crystals. Judith posted cryptic videos about alignment through sacrifice on social media. I waited until the black car showed up on our street. It was unmarked. Government plates. A man stepped out in a clean suit, checked an address on a clipboard, and walked up to the neighbor's house. Not ours, but he glanced at me through his sunglasses as I watched from the window. That was when I knew. They had received the files. And they were already moving. 2 days later, Clara canceled all her sessions. She said Ria needed space. That something shocking had happened. She was nervous, agitated. She stopped cooking, stopped lighting candles. She started triple locking the front door. I watched the paranoia bloom inside her like rot. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know from where. And I didn't give her a clue. Because the thing about being called the quiet one for years being the calm, the stable, the supportive ease that no one expects the storm to come from you. But I had become the storm, and I wasn't finished. The arrest didn't happen like I thought it would. There were no helicopters, no swarming agents in tactical gear. It started with silence, again, but this time, not mine. There's Clara stopped talking about Ria altogether. One day she simply said, "I think I'll skip Sedona this month." When I asked why, she muttered something about energy shifts and group confusion. I just nodded, like always. But inside I felt it, the unraveling. It had begun. Then came the first article. I found it early one morning while scrolling in bed. My phone dimmed to avoid waking her. Federal investigation targets spiritual empowerment network for fraud and exploitation. No names, no photos. But the language was familiar, too familiar. Terms like energetic surrender, ritualized cleansing, and non-traditional contract work leapt off the screen. I saved the article. Then I emailed it to myself from a burner account. Clara read it that afternoon. She didn't say a word for 10 minutes, just stared at the screen. Her hand was shaking. Then she looked at me and whispered, "This is going to destroy everything." I asked, "Did you do something that deserves to be destroyed?" She didn't answer. The next week, Ria deleted all her social media accounts. The online classes vanished. The retreat center's website went offline. Their payment processor posted a statement claiming they'd cut ties over violations of service terms. But it was too late. The dam had already cracked. And then the arrest. It started with Judith. She was picked up at her house just outside Tucson. According to the reports, federal agents found thousands of documents, ledgers, transcripts, contracts signed by women across the country. Even a safe hidden under her floorboards with labeled USB drives. There were photographs, cash, a list of Tier 3 initiates. I saw it all later during discovery. But at the time, all I saw was the headline: Mother of controversial life coach arrested in widespread federal probe. Ria's arrest came 3 days later. She tried to flee. They caught her at the airport. Alone. Carry-on only. No phone, just a burner and a boarding pass to Costa Rica. She didn't make it to the gate. Clara was on the couch when it broke on the news. Lev. I watched her body collapse in on itself. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just shrank. I asked, "Were you planning to leave with her?" Still. No answer. The fallout was immediate. Women started coming forward. Dozens, then hundreds. Survivors, family members, ex-partners. Testimonies poured in across social media, forums, even podcasts. Each story carried the same pattern. Spiritual. Healing turned financial dependence. Intimacy reframed as transcendence. Consent blurred by doctrine. Fear wrapped in silk. Some had given everything: homes, marriages, bodies, children, all. Under the guidance of divine womanhood, led by Ria and Judith. And somehow, by Clara too. She wasn't officially named in the indictments. Not then. But her name surfaced. In testimonials. In receipts. In screenshots. She became untouchable by the law, but not by the truth. Every door closed on her. Clients ghosted. Speaking invites rescinded. She lost the contract with that startup she'd pitched a healing leadership curriculum to. I watched her unravel like a silk ribbon held too tight. One night, she asked me if I believed she deserved it. I didn't lie. Yes. I said, because the women who enabled evil are not innocent. She packed her things 2 days later. No big speech. No performative sadness. Just silence. The same kind she always demanded from me. She left behind 3 robes. A stack of affirmation cards, and one last note. You were always stronger than I let myself admit. I burned it. The media dubbed it the core unbinding collapse. A sensational title for something that felt anything but. Because behind every court date, every statement, every indictment, were women who would never fully heal. Trust that would never return. Truth that would never be uncomplicated. But there was also light, and that light, I knew, had come from a single act. Someone finally stopped playing along. It had been months since Clara left the house. Months since I'd stood at the window and watched her figure shrink into the passenger seat of a friend's car. A single duffel bag on her lap, no backward glance. I had expected that departure to bring closure. I had thought I'd feel relief, even triumph. Instead, it left behind a vacuum, a silence that rang louder than all the whispered affirmations and gaslighting apologies she'd ever given me. The house was mine again. My name on the deed, my music in the kitchen, my breath in every room. I had changed the locks, scrubbed the walls, burned every trace of sage she'd ever used to mask harm as healing. But some ghosts don't need to linger in objects.
They
settle in your muscles, in the way you flinch at compliments, in the fact that you still double-check your location settings every time you post online. I didn't expect to hear from her again, but then came the letter. It arrived in a cream envelope, addressed in her handwriting, the kind she used for manifestation journals and vision boards. There was no return address, no stamp, just dropped into my mailbox like a secret hoping to be found. I held it for hours before opening it. Inside, a single page. It wasn't poetic, not her usual style. No metaphors, no sacred geometry or lunar phases. Just a plain, almost sterile apology. Mila, I know you don't owe me a single second of your time, but I needed to say what I couldn't say when I was drowning in my own lies. I see it now. All of it. I believed what Ria told me because it felt easier than believing I'd become someone dangerous. But I was dangerous to you.
I'm
sorry, not because I want you back, but because you deserve better. I hope you are safe and loved and seen. Clara, I didn't cry. I read it again. Then a 3rd time. And then I laughed. A short, bitter sound that echoed in the hallway like a question no one wanted to answer, because it wasn't the worst apology I'd ever seen. It was decent. Honest maybe, but what does honesty weigh when it shows up after the wreckage? When it's delivered from a safe distance, after you've already rebuilt yourself from the ashes they left you in. I didn't respond. A week later, she tried again. This time, a voicemail. I hadn't blocked her number, a mistake I corrected. Afterward, she said she'd heard about the speaking event I was scheduled to attend, that she was proud of me, that she'd be there if I was okay with it. I wasn't. I blocked the number. She sent an email through a mutual contact. A simple question. Can Mila forgive me? No. Because forgiveness isn't a gift owed to those who only learn to say sorry after their stage collapsed. I wanted to forgive her. For years I tried to make myself small, patient, perfect, so she'd change, so she'd apologize. And now that she had, I realized the cruelest part. I didn't need it anymore. The peace I'd built came not from her words, but from my own decision to stop participating in her story. I didn't need her guilt. I didn't want her redemption arc. I wanted my life back. So I showed up to my panel on emotional manipulation and spiritual abuse. Walked on stage to a room of strangers who saw me as a survivor, not a shadow. And I told the truth, every piece of it. The lies, the seduction, the weaponized softness, the control masked as healing. I saw women cry in the front row. I saw men shift uncomfortably when I described the cost of being emotionally erased. I spoke until my voice broke. And I didn't stop. When I stepped down, someone hugged me. I don't even remember their name. Just the feeling, solid, warm, real. That night, I burned her letter, not out of hate, but because some apologies belong to the fire, not to your heart. People love a story with clear villains. They want sharp edges, evil that wears dark clothes, speaks in commands, and leaves bruises you can point to. But what happens when the pain comes dressed in soft fabrics and whispered intentions? When the monster in the room lights candles and says she's just trying to help you align with your true feminine energy. They don't believe you, they say, but she seems so nice. They ask, are you sure it wasn't just a misunderstanding? And the worst one, why didn't you leave sooner? The truth is, I did. In pieces, I left every time I swallowed my voice to keep the peace. Every time I allowed my reality to be rewritten in favor of her narrative. Every time I told myself, maybe this is just what love feels like when it's healing you. I know better now. After Claire's apology, if you can call it that, I stopped needing people to see me as forgiving. I stopped trying to prove I was the bigger person. Because being the bigger person nearly destroyed me. I wasn't the villain. I was just the only one in the room willing to name what was happening. When I speak at conferences now, I tell people manipulation is rarely loud, it's a slow erosion. It tells you that you're crazy for wanting air while it seals every window shut. It makes you question your instincts until you can't tell the difference between intuition and anxiety. And worst of all, it convinces you that you're the abuser for fighting back. I get messages now, hundreds, from women, from queer people, from survivors. People who were told they weren't aligned, who were gaslit with astrology charts, spiritually shamed into silence, guilted by goddesses and moon cycles. People who were told that trauma was just energy blockage, and that questioning authority meant you weren't vibrating high enough. They're not just stories. They're alarms, echoes, pieces of myself in every voice. Sometimes I look back at old photos of me and Clara, our smiles, our shared journals, our matching necklaces from that retreat in New Mexico. I don't delete them. I don't hide them either. They are part of my record. They remind me not just of who she was, but of who I refuse to keep being, and every so often I speak to someone who's still inside it, still under the spell, still blaming themselves for not being healed enough. And I tell them what no one told me early enough. You don't owe loyalty to your own illusion. You don't need to be gentle to be good. You don't have to be the bigger person. When you're the only one bleeding, some people will still call me bitter. Some will say I brought it on myself, that I exaggerated, that I should have handled it privately. Let them talk. I know who I am. I'm the woman who turned on the lights when everyone else was busy adjusting to the dark. I'm the one who said no when yes was expected and silence was required. I'm the one who kept the receipts, told the truth, and refused to spiritualize abuse just because it came with candles and crystals. I'm not here to be the hero in someone else's redemption arc. I'm not here to be your moral compass, your ex with grace, your spiritual martyr. I'm Mila. I'm 33. I survived a cult disguised as healing. I exposed a mother-daughter empire built on exploitation. And I chose myself not because it was easy, but because pretending was killing me. And I was never meant to die in someone else's story.